our friend Jeff Darlington back here on the show. How are you, Jeff?
Hey, that Tua story was fantastic.
Oh, yeah, the one we just played on our Peacock with him at the Super Bowl.
Oh, okay. Did everybody not hear that?
No, the radio network did not, but that's great that you. I know you're on hold. I'm more than happy to talk about it. That Tua at the Super Bowl in South Florida back in 2019, 2020 calendar year, saying that Nick Saban went up to him after he won the national championship with a throw that dug them out of such a deep hole that he put them in because he took such a terrible sack. He joked with Saban at the time, and that's interesting that he chose to do that. But it's, Tua was feeling his oats, that's for sure.
It reminds me of another story about the other guy, the other Saban, which is Bill Belichick. I was at the Patriots after party, and Julian Edelman and Danny Amendola are spraying champagne all over each other, and Julian Edelman says, "Where's Bill?" with the champagne bottle. And he's going to spray. This is after he gets the MVP. He's going to spray Bill Belichick, and Danny Amendola stops him and says, "You can't do that, man." And he goes, "What's he going to do, fire me?" And Danny Amendola looks at him and says, "Yes." Those guys don't joke around, man.
They don't, I know. And Brian Flores comes from the Belichick coaching tree, as we know. So walk me through what happened in Dolphins minicamp, mandatory minicamp, with their quarterback that kind of has to work out, one would say, right now, the way things look in Miami. Go for it, Jeff Darlington.
So, I think this one requires a lot of context and well beyond the headline that is obvious, which is Tua Tagovailoa throws 5 interceptions during minicamp practice. So here's the deal. First of which, I'm not going to completely sugarcoat this thing. He didn't look great. He didn't look great before the torrential rain. Even when he wasn't throwing interceptions, he didn't look great. And this is a guy who talking to people in the organization, including yesterday before practice, people kept saying he's different. He came back different. He looks better physically. He seems better mentally. He just seems more prepared for what he's about to endure. After practice, I talked to somebody who said, "Look, here's the deal. I can tell you, I heard it. Flores told them before practice, he called it a passing camp. He said, this is a teaching camp, that this is the time to be aggressive, to make mistakes. I want you firing downfield. I want you doing those things that maybe you wouldn't do during games in the season." So, it's somewhere down the middle here. Is it cause for concern? It's a June minicamp. Probably not. But for a guy that is coming under such obvious wonder about what he's going to do in year 2, we're going to probably criticize and look at everything he does, including a practice in which he throws 5 picks. So fair is probably somewhere down the middle.
So then let's put the 5 picks aside for a moment and just say that's the reason why we're having this conversation now on June 16th, right?
Yeah.
But it's still a conversation that was being had while he and Fitzpatrick were on the same roster last year, and Fitzpatrick, as Fitzpatrick usually does, gets the gig back for a couple of quarters when the Dolphins needed to make the playoffs, and it was obvious that Tua was struggling to try and get the Dolphins to that spot. And now comes the whole conversation about Deshaun Watson. Let's be flat out straightforward about this, that the Dolphins have the draft capital still to go and get Deshaun Watson should he prove to be a viable quarterback. So let's just use this now as the backdrop and revisit what you said about him showing up differently in Miami. What do they mean? What are you hearing about that? What do Dolphins front office, if not coaches, tell you on that front? What's the deal there?
Look, I think that they're trying to be as supportive as possible of Tua and what he can do this season. And I also think that they at this point, when we talk about Deshaun Watson, they have to be, because let's be honest, Tua right now throwing 5 picks in a minicamp practice still isn't as bad as curious as the future of Deshaun Watson. We don't know enough about whether and when he will be available. It is way too speculative. Like I started to go down this same sort of avenue in my own head yesterday as I'm watching Tua throw these picks about Watson, and then I'm sitting there saying, when is Watson going to be available? Is he going to play at all this year? And I understand we want to be as fair as possible to this process, but even if this process is played out expeditiously, what does that even mean? So, yes, if Tua goes into training camp and struggles and Deshaun Watson's picture is more clear, I don't know how the Dolphins can't consider it. But there is a lot that has to happen in the coming months for that to go from a conversation between us and a reality for the Miami Dolphins.
So then let's just stay here for a second before we revisit how Tua's shown up differently. What are you hearing on this? I mean, what's going on that front?
Look, I've heard everything from his footwork is better to, he's not worried about, he's not having to do, this time last year, he was having to combine learning a playbook with rehabilitating a hip. So, there's a lot of factors that people seem to think will make him better. I also can't ignore, despite maybe it being a little unfair, what you brought up about Fitzpatrick last year. And if we go back to that final game that they lost in the playoffs, that final game of the year when Fitzpatrick had COVID, and if Fitzpatrick did not have COVID, you cannot convince me for a second that he is not in that game in the second half. And what kind of conversation are we now having if that was the case? If Tua couldn't finish out that game and then also was struggling now. I think he deserves the patience that the Dolphins are giving him, but I do understand those who are wondering if he is the answer. It'll play out. It's going to play out in front of us. We're going to see it. I get both sides of it, to be completely clear.
Jeff Darlington here on the Rich Eisen Show. I mean, Tua did admit earlier this spring that he wasn't as well-versed in the playbook as I guess he needed to be. And
I don't know how he could have been, Rich. I would defend him there.
Right.
Last year was weird, man, with COVID, with his hip. Like, I get that. I do understand why maybe his transparency in that, I get that it gets a little bit of attention, but I kind of understand it. And maybe he shouldn't admit it, but he is nothing if not an honest and vulnerable human.
This is so fascinating to me, Jeff, because of who he was in college and the story that the Dolphins, pretty much the minute he looked off as safety to beat Georgia in the national championship game, changed their entire process to get him. Burrow throws 60 touchdowns, thus Tua is available for them, but so is Justin Herbert, who has a season in which he had the same offseason, right, Jeff, where he didn't have this, he didn't have on-field workouts, he didn't have any of that, and he's told literally 5 minutes before a game, you're starting against Patrick Mahomes, and winds up being rookie of the year, and we're sitting here wondering why Tua's talent level can't overcome lack of playbook knowledge in the same way that we saw Herbert do it this past year.
And Rich, that's the. I feel like I've contradicted myself 10 times, and I'm not just trying to agree with you by any means here, but like that's the weird thing about this. Like when you try to just treat the Tua situation in a vacuum, you can be patient, you can be understanding. But then when you start to bring in these other factors, whether it's Deshaun Watson's potential availability, whether it's the fact that they could have had Justin Herbert, and there's no way that even the ardent Tua fans, the guys who are most supportive, can't in the back of their heads be sitting there still saying, man, Herbert looks good. I mean, you can't, he's so clearly at this point a franchise quarterback. So I am equally fascinated by what feels now to be more of an experiment than a conviction in Tua, and I will be down here for every minute of it.
Jeff Darlington here on the Rich Eisen Show, fresh off of the Miami Dolphins going through the motions, it seems right now. How many interceptions did Jacoby Brissett throw yesterday?
He threw two of his own.
Oh my gosh! So everybody's just winging it all over the lot, huh? I mean,
it was torrential. I mean, like again, I'm not. The rain was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It wasn't that L.A. rain. Let me tell you what, Rich.
Okay. So, what can you tell me about what you're hearing on the Aaron Rodgers front? What do you got for me from what your sources are telling you?
It's funny. I keep hearing that it's not about the contract. It's not about the money.
What's it
then
about?
I keep hearing in my conversations that it's about the contract. It's about the money. And maybe it's somewhere in between. Like I from what I understand, like I see him wanting the type of security that not only provides him faith in this year, but faith that if he winds up with another team because the Packers decide to move on, that he will still be equally secure. And that's a complicated statement, but this is a complicated situation. And I'm not going to just call him a complicated fella, because I think the Packers also probably need to do a better job of managing this thing from the outside as well.
When he wore that sweatshirt yesterday, I'm offended. Do you think he really is offended, or he's making fun of media members wondering if he's offended? I can't figure that one out.
I can't feel him out either, man. The second, I think that's his goal, just to throw chaos into the mix. Like he's a. You know what? I'll agree with Mark Murphy. Aaron Rodgers is a complicated fella. I'm just not the CEO who's trying to convince him to come work for me, so I feel a little bit more okay saying it than maybe Mark should.
No, that's what I was saying on Monday when this whole thing came up, is, you've been through all the collective bargaining agreement labor wars, which is the ultimate negotiation that anybody who covers the NFL, certainly for the last 10, 15, 20 years, will recall.
Right.
We may not see any greater negotiation in the National Football League than that one. Any statement can send anybody sideways. Anybody.
You're right.
And so, to say complicated fella, that also indicates to the fan base, who's the jury in the court of public opinion, we're not the complicated one. We'll have him in. He's the complicated fella. Like, that's the way it comes across, even though Mark Murphy probably did not mean it that way.
Maybe he didn't mean it that way, but Rich, he did the same thing like a week earlier in a Q&A on the Packers website, where someone wasn't even asking a question about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you go look it up, and Mark Murphy took it upon himself to bring up Aaron Rodgers and
dividing the fan base.
Yeah, dividing the fan base. That comment. I mean, it wasn't even the question. It wasn't even a question. It was a statement to Mark Murphy, and it had nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. So, like, as much as I want to say, yeah, maybe he didn't mean to do it. Well, guess what? His job is to say the right things, not the wrong things.
How could James Jones fix this, Jeff? I mean, he's saying that he can get in a room and with everybody and fix it. I don't know.
I wouldn't want to be the mediator of that situation. Aaron Rodgers, that guy he's too smart. He's going to ultimately do what he wants to do. I don't see mediation of any kind. I think he's going to decide what he wants and what's best for him. And he's going to say, this is what I need to come back. I don't know what that is or when that is. And he's going to make that decision. By the way, I'll say this, Rich. I think he does play for the Packers this year. It doesn't make logistical sense for him to sit out based on the money, based on the legacy, based on all of these things. I understand he's a prideful person, but he is also a person of self-interest. And I think that he ultimately will see that playing this year, even if it's his last, is in his best self-interest.
Jeff, I appreciate the time, man. Let's keep chatting.
Thanks,
let's keep chatting. You be well. You take care.
Thanks, brother.
You bet. That's Jeff Darlington. I follow him on Twitter. You should follow him too, @Jeff Darlington. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.